Hey everybody, Senator Tim Kaine here. It's that time of year again. Congress is beginning its annual appropriations process when we decide how we're going to spend the federal budgetary dollars for fiscal year 2024. And for the third year in a row, the Senate is accepting requests for congressionally directed spending, CDS, formerly known as earmarks. As we go through this process, I want to hear from you about the needs in your community and how I can support those needs. Some of you may remember that Congress had earmarks for many years and then eliminated them in 2011, 2 years before I arrived in the Senate. And the reason they eliminated them is that the earmark process that happened long ago was not one that was very transparent. Instead, senators and House members would stick earmarks in the appropriations bills at the very last minute, and often there would be a vote on a massive budget bill that would contain items that people really hadn't paid attention to. But after earmarks were banned, Congress quickly discovered that eliminating them just transferred spending decisions away from the elected members of the Article I branch into the executive branch. And look, there's nothing against the executive branch making spending decisions, but when the people making the budgets, and the budget is a congressional responsibility, when we're making the budget, we should have some ability to direct funding, because actually we're the ones that live all around the country and are the most in touch with citizens. So I was very excited when the Democratic majority in 2021 worked together with Republicans to return the power to Congress to direct congressional expenditures in some portion of the federal budget. Most of the federal budget is still dollars that we allocate to federal agencies, and they make the in-depth spending decisions. But a portion of the budget now involves the elected representatives in the House and Senate working with the communities to make sure that you have a say in how funding is done. And of course, we put new safeguards in place to cut out some of the abuses that had led to earmarks being banned in the past. For instance, every Senate office and House office that requests earmarks have to publicly disclose the earmark requests on our website. The requests have to go through an intense vetting process. We can't airdrop a new project nobody's ever seen before into a must-pass bill at the very end of the session, for example. And so these reforms are reasonable, and it means that anyone in Virginia can go onto my website, a journalist, a mayor, an everyday citizen, and look and see, okay, what kind of earmarks are Senator Kaine requesting? Are they good organizations? Are they spread all around the state? Are they for legitimate purposes? Are the amounts that are asked for reasonable? So we started the earmark process 2 years ago. And in the past 2 years, I've only seen this become more and more powerful. Wherever I go in the Commonwealth, or when I meet Virginians in DC, someone is always talking to me about a community need, and often about what a difference it has made to them to apply for and receive a community-directed expenditure so that they can apply that to community needs. We've received from the appropriations committees successful consideration of our requests in a whole variety of fields: infrastructure, workforce development, violence prevention, broadband build-out. We've gotten significant down payments on some projects we've been working on for years, like the new container terminal on Craney Island at the Port of Virginia, projects in rural areas that have tended to be overlooked, maybe because the populations are small when we didn't have earmarks, are now receiving some significant funding. For example, the Coalfields Expressway in Southwest Virginia, or the Eastern Shore Rail Trail that serves the Eastern Shore, or saving Tangier Island in the Chesapeake Bay. This is something we've learned that rural priorities tend to do pretty well as we advocate for earmark requests. There are too many to name, but you can see on my website the projects that we've received funding for in the last 2 years. So here's a few things that I want you to know if you are considering making a funding request to my office. And usually the requests are made by state or local governments, nonprofit organizations, or educational institutions. For-profit companies are not allowed to make earmark requests. So first, you've got to be either a state or local government, nonprofit organization, or educational institution. Second, the scope of an earmark request tends to be a maximum $1 million or a couple of $1 million, or sometimes in the few $100,000 range for a small nonprofit. They're not in the $100 million or $1 billion range. Three, If you have a project where a federal grant will put shovels in the ground, that's going to be more competitive than something where you might get the first million of a massive project, but you won't be able to use it unless you find the other 99 million, for example. 4, we found that the appropriators really like projects that have some regional significance. So you can get an earmark for a project that serves one community, but we tend to find a higher batting average if you have a project that's going to serve maybe a couple cities and counties. That's just grist for the mill from the first 2 years. 5th, start early. There's some paperwork involved. You'll see it when you click on the links under this video, and that's to make sure the projects are all, vetted, serious, a good use of taxpayer dollars, and a higher likelihood of making those on the appropriations committee say this is a priority that we want to fund. 6, you don't have to do this on your own. My Senate staff is available to consult with you and answer questions and even work with you on what would be a competitive project. And then finally, what are your chances of getting funded? Well, I'd love for 100% of all funds to go to Virginia projects, but senators from every other state wants them too, and we need to prioritize. An important criterion I use is this. When Virginia organizations apply, I look to try to make sure that we cover all regions of the Commonwealth and all sizes of communities. So not just Northern Virginia, but also the Northern Neck. Not just Fairfax County, but what about Highland County? Not just Richmond, but Emporia. In the education space, not just UVA or Virginia Tech, but what about Marymount or Virginia Union or our wonderful community colleges? If your grants office is just 2 or 3 people, or even if it's just you, we still want to know what kinds of projects would be helpful in your community. We're not able to fund everything, and the earmarked part of the federal budget is just a small part of the overall budget. But we'll be able to fund some very good projects throughout Virginia. And I'm really looking forward, as we're starting on the 3rd year of community-directed expenditures, to see the great project ideas that you forward into my office. So please read the information below on this web page carefully. Don't hesitate to reach out to my staff with questions. And thanks for focusing on this, and I look forward to seeing you around Virginia and learning about the important work that you're doing in your communities.